Good morning. So we've taken the real estate math course, the BC real estate math course, the chapter 13 and chapter 14. We've divided chapter 13 into two parts, and we've taken chapter 14 into three parts. The first part of chapter 13, we'll discuss how the calculator is used, how to use it well, and all the keys for the HP 10B2 Plus calculator. We'll talk about the basic loans and the investment calculations. We'll talk about interest-only loans, interest accruing loans, and fully amortized loans. Chapter 13, part 1 is probably the most important part of the math course. So if you have to go through this once or twice, use the time wisely and go through it a few times. So your calculator, the HP 10B2 calculator, if you take a look at the entire calculator, it has its regular 1 to 9 buttons or tabs. And then at the bottom here, it has an equal sign. In this calculator, you put your numbers in first and then use this row as your financial tabs. So you see you have an N there, I per year. That's not one per year, that's interest rate per year. PV stands for present value, PMT stands for payment, and FV stands for at the end future value. Underneath the white buttons, you also have these yellow buttons, and we will be using the yellow tabs also. To get to the yellow tabs, you have to press this yellow tab or the second function button. It's called the second function. There's also a blue tab right here, blue tab, which will not be used for our course. So let's get started on this. Okay, if we were to introduce the variables and the language of the finance math, we're not going to use capital I standing for interest rate. We're going to be using a capital J. And there's a couple of different names for the capital J. Capital J stands for the interest rate per year. And there's going to be a tiny little number underneath on your right-hand side at the bottom of J. That number stands for the compounding period. We'll talk a lot more about that in part 2 of chapter 13. Another name for the annual interest rate is a nominal rate. So lots of different language hang in there. And then if we take a look at the N, if we take a look at the first row on top of the HP 10B2 calculator, N stands for the time period, and PV stands for the present value in dollars. You notice PV, PMT, and FV are in dollars. They could be positives or negatives, but that they stand for dollars. And N stands for a time period, and J stands for an interest rate, and the little p per year is compounding periods per year. So let's bring in the calculator to show you where these buttons are on the calculator. Let's take a look at the HP 10B2 Plus calculator that you see on the screen now. When you purchase this calculator, first thing you should do is you need to press the on button and the N button and the FV button at the same time. So press on, N, and FV at the same time. It's very difficult for me to do that on the screen. They have to be done with one hand with all three of them together. And once you do that, you'll see on the screen CORP HP 2010. And that means your calculator is set, ready to start. A couple of other things on this calculator. Okay, whenever you start a new question, you need to, let's say I have this number on the screen. If I press the C button, C tab, it clears the screen. If there's numbers inputted into N or the I per year, the PV and the payment and so on, you need to press second function with C. That'll clear all. Really, that means clear everything that's in the calculator that we may have from the previous question. So let me give you an example. Let's say n is 12, and I clear this. That n equals 12 is still there. Recall n. The only way to get rid of everything from the previous question is to press the second function, this orange button, and then this. Now, if I was to recall n, it's not there. Okay. Another thing that we need to do is whenever you buy a calculator, you should get that 3 steps done. Plus, you should press second function, equal sign, and the decimal. That will give you 10. And that's what you want for all your calculations. If you press second function equal with any number, like let's say 3, that means it'll give you 3 significant figures. You don't want that. If you do want to use your calculator with more significant figures, and it's a little bit tricky, second function equal, use a 9. That means it's going to give you the full screen. So whenever you're doing a question times 98.36, it'll still have the extra digits as zeros. Now, if I was to do the same question, you would still have the same answer if I was to do this way. That way you don't see the extra zeros. It's a good way to start your calculator. Use your calculator, second function, equal decimal. Now, you notice you have a comma here after the 450,000, comma, 236 decimal 16. This means 16 cents. Sometimes you may see this on your screen where the decimal, where the comma is need to be, you see a decimal, and where you need to see the decimal, you see a comma. This is now your calculator in what's called the French mode. It's very difficult to use in French mode. You want it in English mode. So if this does happen, then you need to take a look at the underneath the decimal. You see a comma slash decimal. So it's in the wrong order now. To fix the order, you say second function and the dot. Now it's fixed. So you do want to see a decimal after the numbers here as money, and you do want to see commas after every 1,000. So also we have here the tabs, the N, the I per year, PV, PMT, and the FV. And we also see underneath in white, we see these orange tabs. To get to the orange tabs, you have to press the orange button first and then the, okay? Another thing is this calculator, you press your, let's say it's 12 for N, you put in the number 12, then the N. Let's say you want to put in something for PV. Let's say you want to put in $230,000 for PV. You put in your 230,000, then the PV. So the numbers go first, tabs go afterwards.
So this is an example question.
This one doesn't need a calculator.
Yeah, this one doesn't need a calculator, but okay, so now I'm going
to... Okay, we're going to start on the first math question for chapter 13. And the question is, there's a loan of $200,000 today at an interest rate of 4% per annum. Per annum means per year. So that's the J value. The J value is 4%. And the tiny subscript for the J value is the compounding period. It's compounded annually. So annually means once per year. So the value we have is what's called J1, and that's 4%. We are asked to find the amount owing after 5 years. So we are asked to find the FV. So this is how we do this question. We draw the timeline diagram. And on the timeline diagram, first thing we do is we put the J value. Well, J is 4%, and it has a 1 subscript. That's because it's compounded annually. If it was compounded semi-annually, you would say J2. If it was compounded quarterly, that would be J4. If it was compounded daily, that would be J365. If it was compounded monthly, that would be J12. Okay, now fill in the rest. What is the time period? It's a 5 years, so N is 5. Then we go to the left corner and we put in the PV value. PV is the amount today of either the loan or the investment. This is a loan, so it's a positive value. In real life, yes, we do think of a loan as a negative value, but for this course, think of any time money's coming to you. When you get a loan, money comes to you, so that's 200,000 positive. And when you have to pay that loan off, if you're going to pay it off by making payments, this should be a capital S here, payments, meaning for the 5 years, if it's every year you're making a payment, that means you're making 5 payments. So this should say payments of $0 every year. And in this question, we are looking for what is the amount owing after 5 years. That's the future amount of money owing after 5 years. So now we always set up the timeline diagram exactly this way. Now we're going to bring in the calculator and we are looking for FV. So let's get started. Bring in the calculator, and the calculator is right there. First thing you do is not press clear. Every time you do a new question, you always press what's second function clear. And what that does, let me show you. Let's say we had $458 as PV, okay? And I clear. You will notice that when I say recall PV, that number is still there. And that might interfere with your calculations. So instead of just pressing clear, press second function clear before you do any question. And then you see a 0. And if I was to recall PV, every number is not, there are no numbers inside this calculator. So always start with your calculator with clear all. Now we're ready to do the question. First thing you're going to do is deal with the J1. And the 1 is called the compounding period. So 1, and the compounding period is right here. P per year underneath the payment. So second function right there. Now in the calculator, the compounding period is 1. Now we're going to put in the 4%. 4. And 4 is going to go in as nominal percent right underneath I per year. So you need to press the orange button and there. That's the hardest part of this course. Let me do that again for you. Every time you start a question, you clear all. Every time you do a question, you put in your compounding period first. That's 1 for the compounding period. And 4 for the nominal interest rate. Now you're going to be confused as to what should I put next. Now you look at the calculator and you start from this row from N and you work towards the right to make sure you put in the amounts that you have and you leave the amount that you're looking for and you press that tab last. So let me do this all over again for you. I'm just going to do the first few examples in slow motion. Afterwards, we'll go through it much faster. So 1 for the compounding period, right here. 4 for the interest rate, right here. Now I go here and I say, I'm going to put in N. I look at my diagram and I see N is 5. So put in 5 for N. Now I go to I per year or NOM. I've already dealt with this button, this tab, so leave it alone. Don't do anything to this. I know some textbooks deal with it a little bit differently where they just go through this way, but I like to deal with the J value first and then not deal with J afterwards. PV, look at my diagram. PV is 200,000. If by any chance I made a mistake, I can use the reverse tab right here. So that's still 2 million. I needed 200,000. There's 200,000. That's PV. Next is payments. Well, how many payments am I making? Well, 5 years means 5 payments. But how much? How much is 0 for the payments? And FV is what I'm looking for. I'm going to press that. And that's going to tell me that there is $243 $243,000 owing after 5 years. This negative means owing. So the answer to this question is negative $243,330. When you are answering the question for your exam, there will not be a negative there. You need to know that negative means you are owing and positive means you are getting. Thank you. Example 2. Now we have a loan, again, of $200,000. At this time, in this question, we have the interest rate still as 4% per annum, but now it's compounded semi-annually. I told you the hardest part of this course is dealing with this semi-annual interest rates and so on. So we're going to do a lot of questions on that. Once you get the hang of that, the rest of the course is downhill. So again, we are looking for how much is owing after 5 years if someone took out a loan of $200,000 for 5 years at an interest rate of 4% per annum compounded semi-annually. So first thing, draw the timeline diagram. And this time it's not J1, but it's J2. Semi-annual means twice a year. So the subscript is 2 and the interest rate is 4%. And the time period is 5 years. And we're going to talk about this semi-annual period. Notice N it's not time. On your calculator, it's not T, it's N. N stands for number of time periods within that timeline. So if it's a 5-year timeline and you are talking about semi-annual periods, that means you're talking about 10 periods. 5 times 2, that's how you get the 10. PV is still 200. There's no payments being made. So in this situation, if there were payments being made, there would be 10 payments being made. Yes, there are 10 payments being made of $0. And we are asked to find how much would be owing after 5 years where the interest rate is J2 equals 4%. So we are asking the calculator to calculate for us future value, which is the loan amount owing after 5 years, where the interest rate is J2 equals 4. So let's bring in the calculator. So again, we have our calculator. And first thing we're going to do is deal with this J2 thing. First thing before that is instead of just clear button, we go second function clear. Now, everything's off the screen and everything's off from inside the calculator. So 2 compounding periods. That goes here. And the interest rate is 4, nominal, second function, done. Let me do that again for you. First thing, clear the calculator. J2 equals 4. How do we put that into the calculator? 2 for the compounding period, 4 for the nominal interest rate. Next, look at the calculator, not look at the diagram now. Look at the calculator and work towards the right. What is N? N is not 5. N is how many time periods, how many payments would there be if it was 2 payments per year and a 5-year period. So N is 10. No yellow function, no yellow function. This one we've already dealt with. Interest rate, J value we've already dealt with. PV, 200,000. PV. Payments, how much payments? Every payment is going to be $0. And we're looking for FV, and the amount owing would be $243,798. Let me do this again for you. Clear all. 2 for the compounding period. 4 for the interest rate, nominal interest rate. No more yellow buttons. Done. N, look at the diagram. N is 5 years, but semi-annual periods, that means N is 10. This is done. PV is 200,000. Payments amount 0, and FV is what we press. That's what we get. People will be confused about payment. Payment isn't how many payments. N stands for how many payments. This PMT stands for the amount of the payment. In this case, $0. Example three. Example three. So again, a loan of 200,000. We're going to do a lot of practices using almost the same numbers. Loan of 200,000, but this time the interest rate is compounded monthly. So compounded monthly means J12, and the interest rate is 4%. So again, what is the amount owing after 5 years? Timeline diagram. J12 equals 4% this time. N is 5 years. So N is 5 years, but how many periods are there in 5 years? How many monthly periods are there in 5 years? So there would be 60 monthly periods in that 5 years. So when we put in N into the HP 10B2 calculator, we're going to be putting 60. Again, PV is 200,000. How much payments are we making in those 60 months? None. We're making payments of $0, and we're asked to find how much money would be owing after 5 years. So let's bring in the financial calculator. Thing we do first thing we do is clear the calculator, and 12 for the compounding periods, and 4 for the nominal interest rate. See, I'm going much faster. N is 5 years, but we're talking months now. So N is 5 times 12, which is 60. Made a mistake there. 60 for N. This has been done. PV is 200,000. How many payments? Well, it's 60 payments, but how much? 0 for every payment. And FV, we would be owing $244,000. Let me do that one more time quickly for you. 12 for the compounding periods. Example 4. We have a loan of $200,000, and the interest rate is J12, compounded monthly, 4%. This time, the person who got the loan is making a payment of $1,000 per month for this loan. So he's made, in 5 years, he's going to make monthly payment, 60 payments of $1,000. We want to know how much would be owing after 5 years. First thing we do is draw the timeline diagram. Interest rate, we put in J12 equals 4%. We put in the N, which is 5 years, but really it's N is not 5 years. T is 5 years. N is really 60 because we're talking about monthly compounding, monthly payments. So N needs to go in as a 60. Loan is 200,000, and this time we are making payments of $1,000 per month. So the payments that we're making, or the person's making, is going to go in as a negative number because the PV is positive. The person received 200,000. The payment is negative 1,000 because the person is making a payment to the lender, to the bank, of $1,000 per month. So that means he's paying 60 payments of $1,000 per month. And we want to know how much loan is outstanding, how much is owing after 5 years. So again, we're going to bring in the calculator. Okay, so we've got our calculator.